The crack of the gavel shattered the air like a gunshot, causing Willow Harper to flinch against the rough wooden post where they'd tied her wrists. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she wouldn't give these vultures the satisfaction of seeing her break. Not even as the auctioneer's voice boomed across the makeshift platform in the dusty town square of Redemption Creek, Colorado, 1876. Next up, we have a fine young woman, healthy, 20 years of age, good for cooking, cleaning, and whatever else you might fancy. The crowd's laughter made Willow's stomach turn. Starting bid is $50. Men's voices called out numbers that rose steadily, each bid reducing her to nothing more than livestock. This wasn't supposed to be her fate. 2 weeks ago, she'd been traveling west with her uncle after her parents' death, seeking a fresh start. Then the stagecoach attack happened, her uncle was killed, and instead of help, she found herself captured by men who saw her as nothing but merchandise. $120. A red-faced man in the front row called, his eyes crawling over her in a way that made Willow wish she could disappear into the ground. $150. Another shouted. The auctioneer grinned, revealing tobacco-stained teeth. Going once. $500. The crowd fell silent, heads turning toward the back where a tall figure stood partially shadowed by the afternoon sun. The man stepped forward, and Willow saw him clearly for the first time. Broad-shouldered, trail-worn clothes, a weathered face beneath the brim of his hat. His eyes, though, caught her attention, intense blue but not cold like she expected. Something else lived in those eyes. "I ain't heard you right, mister," the auctioneer said, squinting. "You bidding 500. You heard correct." The man's voice was deep, steady. The auctioneer looked around at the crowd, most of whom had already started backing away. No one in this dusty frontier town had that kind of money to spend on a woman, no matter how desperate. Going once, going twice. Sold to the gentleman in the back. Come claim your property, sir. Willow's throat closed as the stranger approached, each boot step bringing her closer to an unknown fate. She studied his face, searching for cruelty, for lust, for any hint of what awaited her. He looked to be in his early 30s, with several days' worth of stubble on his jaw and the weathered skin of someone who lived under the open sky. When he reached the platform, he didn't look at her first. Instead, he tossed a leather pouch to the auctioneer. "Count it." The auctioneer's greedy fingers worked quickly, eyes widening. "It's all here." Only then did the stranger turn to Willow. He stepped close enough that only she could hear his words. "Name's Trace Morgan. I own a ranch about a day's ride from here." His eyes met hers directly. "I'm not going to hurt you, miss. That's a promise." He cut her bonds with a quick slice of his knife, then draped his duster around her shoulders when he noticed how her thin dress had been torn during her capture. Willow said nothing, too afraid to believe this might not be another nightmare waiting to unfold. Her legs trembled as Trace Morgan guided her from the platform, his hand at her elbow not gripping hard, just steadying. "My horse is hitched outside the general store," he said quietly. "Can you walk that far?" She nodded, finding her voice at last. "Why did you do this?" He didn't answer immediately, guiding her through the dispersing crowd. Men watched them pass, some with disappointment, others with speculation. Trace kept her close to his side, his body blocking theirs from view. "We can talk when we're clear of town," was all he said. His horse was a magnificent chestnut gelding with a white blaze down its nose. Without asking, Trace lifted Willow onto the saddle, then mounted behind her. The closeness of his body made her tense, but he kept a respectful distance, reaching around her only to take the reins. They rode in silence until the town of Redemption Creek shrank to nothing more than a smudge on the horizon. Only then did Trace slow the horse to a walk. "To answer your question," he said, his voice coming from just behind her ear, I don't hold with treating people like property. Saw what was happening from the saloon window and couldn't abide it. Willow turned slightly, trying to see his face. You spent $500 on principal. Something that might have been a smile touched his lips. When it matters, yes. What do you expect from me? The question came out blunt, but she needed to know. Nothing you're not willing to give. His answer was equally direct. You'll have a roof, food, and safety at my place. When you're ready to move on, I'll help you get wherever you want to go. Willow had learned the hard way that men rarely did anything without expecting something in return. You're saying you just happened to have $500 on you and decided to spend it all on freeing a stranger. Trace shifted in the saddle. I was in town to deposit money from selling some cattle. Had it all with me. A pause. And you're not the first person I've seen on that auction block. Just the first I was in a position to help. Something in his tone made Willow believe him, though caution kept her guard up. They rode through the afternoon, the landscape changing from dusty plains to rolling hills dotted with pine trees. As the sun began to set, Willow spotted a cabin in the distance, smoke curling from the chimney. That's not the ranch, Trace explained, following her gaze. It's a line cabin. We'll stop there for the night and continue to the main house tomorrow. Willow tensed again, and he must have felt it. There's a lock on the door, he added quietly. You can have the cabin to yourself. I'll sleep with the horse in the lean-to. When they arrived, Trace helped her down, careful not to let his hands linger. The cabin was small but clean, a single room with a bed, table, 2 chairs, and a stone fireplace where embers still glowed. My foreman must have been checking the northern pasture today, Trace explained, stoking the fire. He always keeps this place ready. He moved efficiently around the cabin, lighting the oil lamp and pulling provisions from saddlebags he'd brought in. There's coffee, jerky, and some biscuits. Not much of a meal, but it'll hold you till morning. Willow stood awkwardly by the door, still wearing his duster. Mr. Morgan, Trace, he corrected gently. Trace, I don't understand why you're doing this. He paused in his preparations, considering her with those intense blue eyes. My mother was Cherokee. My father was a white settler who loved her proper and married her, but plenty of people thought she was less than human because of her blood. His jaw tightened. What I saw happening to you today, it was wrong. That's reason enough. He moved toward the door, stopping to place a key on the table. Lock up after I leave. I'll knock 3 times in the morning before I come in. After Trace left, Willow stood motionless for several minutes. Then, slowly, she moved to lock the door. The simple metal key felt heavy in her palm, the first choice she'd been allowed to make in weeks. She looked around the cabin, at the modest bed with its clean blankets, at the fire warming the room, and finally allowed herself to cry. Morning came with 3 distinct knocks, just as promised. Willow had slept fitfully, waking at every sound, but feeling more rested than she had since her capture. She opened the door to find Trace holding a freshly caught rabbit. Thought you might want something more substantial than jerky for breakfast, he said, eyes carefully averted from her disheveled appearance. While Trace skinned the rabbit outside, Willow used water from a bucket to wash her face and hands, trying to make herself presentable. She'd slept in her dress, having nothing else, but she'd removed Trace's duster and folded it neatly on a chair. They ate in near silence, the rabbit cooked simply over the fire. Afterward, Trace said, "It's about 4 hours to the main ranch. We should head out soon if we want to arrive before midday." "What will happen to me there?" Willow asked, gathering courage. "My housekeeper, Mrs. Winters, will help get you settled. She's a good woman, lost her husband to a mining accident years back. She'll find you some proper clothes and anything else you need." He hesitated. "There's a small cabin about 100 yards from the main house. It was built for my foreman, but he prefers staying in the bunkhouse with the other hands. You can have it to yourself. You're giving me my own house." Willow couldn't keep the disbelief from her voice. Trace shrugged. "It's not much, but it's private." As they continued their journey, Willow began to notice details about her rescuer she'd missed before. Despite his imposing size, there was a gentleness to his movements. He spoke rarely but thoughtfully. And when they passed a family of deer grazing in a meadow, the way his face softened told her volumes. The Morgan Ranch appeared suddenly as they crested a hill, a sprawling property nestled in a valley, with a large two-story house, several outbuildings, a corral with horses, and cattle dotting the surrounding pastures. It was larger than Willow had expected, speaking of prosperity and hard work. A gray-haired woman emerged from the main house as they approached, shading her eyes against the sun. When they drew closer, Willow saw a kind face weathered by years but still handsome. "Mrs. Winters," Trace called as he helped Willow dismount. "We have a guest who will be staying with us for a while." The older woman's shrewd eyes took in Willow's condition. The torn dress, the exhaustion, the wariness and understanding dawned on her face. "Well, it's about time we had another woman around here," she said warmly. "Come inside, dear. We'll get you sorted right away." Trace touched Willow's arm gently. "I need to check on some things. You're in good hands with Mrs. Winters." Inside the house, Willow was struck by its unexpected hominess. Though plainly furnished, there were touches that spoke of care: handmade quilts, a vase of wildflowers, books stacked on tables. Mrs. Winters led her upstairs to a bedroom with a copper tub. "I'll have the boys bring hot water. You look like you could use a proper bath." "I don't want to be trouble," Willow began. "Nonsense. Any friend of Trace Morgan's is welcome here." The older woman paused, studying Willow. "He's a good man, you know, the best I've known since my William passed." While Willow soaked in the bath, washing away weeks of grime and fear, Mrs. Winters brought clothes: simple but clean dresses, undergarments, even a pair of boots that might just fit with an extra sock. "They were my daughters," Mrs. Winters explained. "She's in Denver now, married to a bank clerk, never had much use for ranch life." Clean and dressed in clothes that actually fit, Willow felt almost human again. Mrs. Winters insisted she eat a proper meal before showing her to the cabin Trace had mentioned. It was indeed small, just one room with a bed, table, chair, small stove, and washstand, but to Willow, it might as well have been a palace. It had a solid door with a lock and a window that looked out over rolling hills. "Trace had it built 3 years ago," Mrs. Winters explained. "Said every ranch needs good help, and good help deserves decent housing." That evening, as Willow sat on the small porch of her cabin, Trace approached carrying a bundle. "Mrs. Winters said you were settling in," he said, stopping a respectful distance away. "She's been very kind, as have you." Willow gestured to the clothes she wore. "I'm not sure how I'll ever repay all this." "No need." Trace set the bundle on the porch step. "I brought some things you might need: lamp oil, matches, an extra blanket. Gets cold at night, even in summer." He hesitated, then added, "There's also a pistol. Small one, but it'll do the job if needed. Mrs. Winters can show you how to use it if you don't know." Willow was startled. "You're giving me a gun?" "Everyone on this ranch has means to protect themselves," he said simply. "You should too." The implication wasn't lost on her. He was giving her power, choice, protection. Against anyone, including him. "Thank you," she said, the words inadequate for the gift of security he'd just offered. Trace nodded, already turning to leave. "Breakfast is at sunup in the main house, but no one will think poorly of you if you need to rest longer." "Good night, Miss Harper." "Willow," she called after him. "Please call me Willow." He looked back, a smile briefly transforming his serious face. "Good night, Willow." Over the next few days, Willow began to understand the rhythm of ranch life. Mrs. Winters ran the household with cheerful efficiency, while Trace and his men, 8 cowboys of various ages and backgrounds, worked from dawn till dusk with the cattle and horses that were the ranch's livelihood. Willow found herself helping Mrs. Winters with cooking and household tasks, not because anyone expected it, but because idleness made her restless. The work gave her purpose, and gradually, she began to feel safe for the first time since the stagecoach attack. She saw Trace mainly at mealtimes when he and his foreman, a weathered man named Samuel, would discuss the day's work. He was always polite, asking if she had everything she needed, but never pressing for conversation when she fell silent. One evening, about a week after her arrival, Willow was returning to her cabin after helping with dinner when she heard the sound of a harmonica coming from the corral. Curious, she followed the melancholy tune to find Trace sitting on the top rail, playing to the night sky. He stopped when he noticed her, tucking the instrument into his shirt pocket. "Evening." "I didn't mean to interrupt," she said. "I didn't know you played," he shrugged. "Not well, just something to fill the quiet sometimes." Willow climbed up to sit on the rail beside him, surprised at her own boldness. "It sounded beautiful to me." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. "Can I ask you something?" Willow finally said. "Of course. You have all this." She gestured to the ranch spread out around them. "How did you build it?" Trace was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. "Started with 20 acres and 6 cows about 12 years ago. My mother had just died and I had nowhere else to go." His voice was soft, reflective. "Worked for other ranchers, saved every penny. Bought more land when I could, better stock. Got lucky with some investments in the silver mines. And you did it all alone." A shadow crossed his face. "Mostly. Had a wife once for a short while, Emily. She died in childbirth our second year married. The baby too." "I'm sorry," Willow said, meaning it. Trace nodded, accepting her sympathy without dwelling on it. "Life happens as it will, can't change the past." He looked at her. "What about you, before everything that happened? What was your life like?" Willow told him about growing up in Pennsylvania, her father's general store, her mother's garden. How typhoid had taken them both within a week of each other last winter. How her uncle had suggested they head west for a fresh start. "I was going to be a school teacher," she admitted. "Had dreams of a little schoolhouse somewhere helping children learn." "That's still possible," Trace said. "Redemption Creek has no school. Town's growing, though. They'll need a teacher soon enough." The simple way he stated it, as if her dreams still mattered, still existed, brought tears to Willow's eyes. She brushed them away quickly. "It's getting late," she said, sliding down from the rail. "Thank you for the music." As she walked back to her cabin, she felt Trace's eyes on her, not in a way that made her uncomfortable, but in a way that made her feel seen. For the first time since arriving at the ranch, she didn't lock her cabin door. The next morning, Willow woke to the sound of hammering. Curious, she dressed quickly and stepped outside to find Trace and 2 of his men constructing a small bookshelf near her cabin window. "Morning," Trace said, pausing in his work. "Hope we didn't wake you too early." "What's this?" she asked, gesturing to the half-built shelves. "You mentioned being a teacher. Figured you might like some books." He looked almost embarrassed. "I have a fair collection in the house. Thought you might want a place to keep some." The thoughtfulness of the gesture left Willow speechless. That afternoon, when the shelves were finished, Trace brought a stack of books from his personal library: history, poetry, novels, even a few primers that could be used for teaching. "These were my mother's favorites," he said, handling a worn copy of Wordsworth's poems. "She taught me to read from these pages." Willow ran her fingers over the leather binding. "She must have been an extraordinary woman." She was. His voice softened with memory. Faced more hardship than anyone should, but never lost her kindness. Always said education was the one thing no one could take from you. That evening at dinner, Willow noticed something different about the atmosphere. The Cowboys, usually boisterous in their boss's presence, seemed to be watching Trace with speculative glances. Mrs. Winters, too, had a knowing look in her eye as she served the stew. Later, as Willow helped clear dishes, the older woman said quietly, "I've known Trace Morgan for 10 years, and I've never seen him give away his mother's books. Not to anyone." Willow felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the kitchen's heat. "He's a kind man." "Kind, yes, but there's more to it than that." Mrs. Winters gave her a meaningful look. "Just something to consider, dear." As summer progressed into early fall, Willow found herself increasingly comfortable at the Morgan Ranch. She helped Mrs. Winters with the household, learned to ride from Samuel the foreman, and spent peaceful evenings reading on her porch or listening to Trace play his harmonica. They began taking rides together on Sundays, Trace showing her the boundaries of his property, telling stories of how he'd acquired each parcel of land. He was a good storyteller when encouraged, his deep voice painting pictures of the challenges and triumphs of building his ranch from nothing. On one such ride, they stopped by a clear stream for a midday meal. Willow had packed bread, cheese, and apple tarts she'd made that morning. As they ate, sitting on a blanket in the dappled shade of cottonwood trees, she found herself studying Trace's profile. In the months she'd known him, she'd learned to read the subtle expressions on his face, the slight crinkle around his eyes when he was amused, the almost imperceptible tightening of his jaw when worried. Now, as he watched a hawk circling overhead, she saw a peaceful contentment that mirrored her own feelings. "You're staring," he said, without looking at her. Willow blushed. "I was just thinking about how different my life is now from what I expected." She pulled a blade of grass, twirling it between her fingers. "When those men took me after the stagecoach attack, I thought my life was over, or at least any life worth living." Trace turned to face her fully, his blue eyes serious. "And now I'm not sure what to think. I'm grateful, of course, but also confused." "About what?" Willow gathered her courage. "About you. About why you really saved me that day." Trace was quiet for a long moment. "I told you why." "You told me part of why," she corrected gently. "But $500 is a fortune. You could have bought half the town with that money." He sighed, removing his hat and running a hand through his dark hair. "You want the whole truth? Fine. I was in town that day to meet with the bank about expanding the ranch. Had the money for a down payment on the Harmon property that borders mine to the east." Willow's eyes widened. "You spent your expansion money on me," he nodded. "Saw what was happening and couldn't stand by. Simple as that. But your plans' land will still be there next year." He shrugged. "Some things matter more." The implication of his words hung in the air between them. Willow found herself moving closer to him on the blanket, drawn by something she couldn't name. "Trace," she said softly, "in all these months you've never tried to." "I promised I wouldn't hurt you." His voice was equally soft. "Meant it. I know, and you've kept that promise." She took a deep breath. "But what if I wanted you to touch me now?" The change in his eyes was immediate, a flash of heat quickly controlled. "Willow, you don't owe me anything." "This isn't about owing." She reached out, hesitantly placing her hand on his. "This is about wanting." For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, slowly, Trace turned his hand palm up, intertwining his fingers with hers. The simple contact sent a shiver through Willow's body. "I've wanted to touch you since the first moment I saw you," he admitted, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "Not because I bought you, because I saw your strength, your dignity, even standing on that auction block." Willow moved closer still until she could feel the warmth of his breath. Then why did you wait so long? Because you needed time, needed to know you had choices. His free hand came up to gently cup her cheek. Needed to know you chose me, not just safety. I choose you, she whispered and closed the distance between them. His lips were soft against hers, the kiss gentle, questioning. Willow answered by sliding her arms around his neck, pressing closer. Trace responded with a groan, deepening the kiss, his hands moving to her waist, strong but careful. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Trace rested his forehead against hers. We should head back to the ranch. Why? Willow asked, not wanting the moment to end. His smile was tender. Because if we stay here much longer, I might forget I'm trying to be a gentleman. The ride back was charged with new awareness. Every accidental touch as they rode side by side sending sparks through Willow's body. When they reached the ranch, Trace helped her dismount, his hands lingering at her waist. Have dinner with me tonight, he said. Just us. In the house. She nodded, already looking forward to being alone with him again. Mrs. Winters, with a knowing smile, announced she would be taking supper with her sister in town. The Cowboys were conspicuously absent, having been given the evening off to visit the saloon in Redemption Creek. Trace had prepared a simple but elegant meal: roast beef, potatoes, fresh bread laid out in the dining room with candles providing warm light. He'd even found a bottle of wine, a luxury rarely seen on the frontier. As they ate, their conversation flowed easily, touching on books they'd both read, memories of their childhoods, dreams for the future. Willow found herself laughing more than she had in months, delighting in the way Trace's face transformed when he smiled fully. After dinner, they moved to the parlor, where Trace stoked a fire to ward off the autumn chill. Willow sat on the sofa, watching him move about the room, struck by how right it felt to be here with him. When he joined her on the sofa, she didn't hesitate to lean into him, her head resting on his shoulder. His arm came around her, drawing her closer. I never thought I'd feel this way again, he said quietly. After Emily died, I figured that part of my life was over. Willow placed her hand over his heart, feeling its steady beat. And now I'm wondering if you might consider staying, not as my guest or employee, as something else entirely. She sat up to look at him, finding vulnerability in his eyes she'd never seen before. Are you asking what I think you're asking? Not well, apparently. He took her hands in his. Willow Harper, I know it hasn't been very long and you may want more time, but I've fallen in love with you. I'd be honored if you'd consider becoming my wife. Joy burst through Willow like sunshine after a storm. Yes, she said simply. Yes, I'll marry you. His kiss was different this time, passionate, claiming, a promise of all that was to come. Willow matched his fervor, her body pressing against his, wanting to be closer still. When they finally parted, both breathless, Trace said, we should probably wait until we're properly married before. Willow nodded, though reluctantly. How soon can we arrange a wedding? His laugh was low and warm. The circuit preacher comes through in 2 weeks. Too soon. Not soon enough, she answered, bringing his lips back to hers. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. Mrs. Winters was delighted by the news, immediately taking charge of wedding arrangements. The ranch hands offered hearty congratulations, though Samuel confided that they'd been running a betting pool on when the boss would finally propose. Word spread quickly through the nearby homesteads and into Redemption Creek. Neighbors began arriving with gifts and well-wishes: quilts, preserves, handcrafted furniture. Willow was touched by the community's acceptance, having feared that her origins might make her unwelcome. These are good people, Trace explained as they added another gift to the growing collection. They judge by actions, not circumstances. The wedding day dawned clear and cool. The aspens in the surrounding hills turned golden with autumn. Willow wore a dress of pale blue silk that Mrs. Winters had altered from her own wedding gown, with wildflowers in her hair instead of a veil. Trace waited for her beneath an arch his men had constructed near the stream where they'd first kissed. When Willow appeared, walking the path they'd cleared from the house, the look on his face was one she would remember all her days: wonder, joy, and love so powerful it took her breath away. The ceremony was simple but moving, the preacher's words nearly drowned out by the sound of the stream and the rustling leaves. Neighbors and ranch hands stood in a semicircle, Mrs. Winters dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. When it came time for the vows, Trace's voice was steady, his eyes never leaving Willow's face. "I promise to cherish and protect you, to respect your thoughts and dreams, to be your partner in all things. What's mine is yours, this land, this home, my heart." Willow's voice trembled slightly as she responded, "I promise to stand by your side in all seasons, to share your joys and burdens, to build a life of love and purpose together. You found me when I was lost, and in you, I found my home." The celebration afterward lasted well into the evening, with music, dancing, and enough food to feed twice their number. As night fell, lanterns were lit around the property, casting a magical glow over the festivities. Eventually, Trace found Willow amid a group of neighboring women and whispered in her ear, "Think anyone would notice if we disappeared?" Her cheeks flushed with anticipation. "Mrs. Winters might. She's the one who suggested it," he replied with a grin. "Said the party would continue fine without us." Hand in hand, they slipped away from the gathering, making their way to the main house. Trace had insisted that Willow move in there after the wedding, though he'd promised she could keep her cabin as a private space if she wished. At the threshold, he surprised her by sweeping her into his arms. "Tradition," he explained, carrying her through the doorway. Their bedroom was transformed, fresh linens on the bed, wildflowers in vases, candles casting warm light over everything. Someone Mrs. Winters, Willow guessed, had scattered rose petals across the quilt. Trace set her gently on her feet, suddenly looking uncertain. "Is this all right? Not too much?" Willow reached up to touch his face, love overwhelming her. "It's perfect. You're perfect." His smile returned as he bent to kiss her, softly at first, then with growing intensity. His hands moved to the buttons at the back of her dress, pausing for her nod of permission before continuing. As clothing fell away piece by piece, they discovered each other slowly, reverently. Trace's hands and lips traced every inch of her skin, his touch both gentle and passionate. Willow explored the planes of his body, the scars that told stories of his life, the strength that had always made her feel safe. When they came together fully, the joining was both tender and powerful, a physical expression of the bond that had grown between them over the months. Afterward, lying in each other's arms, Willow felt a completeness she'd never known before. "I love you," she whispered against his chest, where his heart still raced beneath her ear. His arms tightened around her. "And I love you, more than I have words to say." In the weeks that followed, they settled into married life with a joy that seemed to infuse everything around them. The ranch thrived under their combined care, Trace managing the cattle and land, Willow bringing new ideas for gardens and improvements to the house. When winter arrived, bringing snow and long evenings by the fire, they discovered new pleasures in their intimacy, learning each other's bodies and desires more deeply. Nights were spent in passionate embraces, mornings in lazy conversations and shared dreams. Spring brought news that filled them both with nervous excitement. Willow was expecting a child. Trace's reaction, upon learning he would be a father, was to lift her in a careful embrace that spoke volumes of his happiness. "Are you scared?" he asked her one night, his hand resting protectively on her growing belly. "A little," she admitted, "but mostly hopeful. Our child will be born into so much love." Trace nodded, his expression solemn. "I'll make sure of it, every day of their life." As Willow's pregnancy progressed, Trace became increasingly protective, insisting she rest more and hiring extra help for the household chores. Mrs. Winters, who had decided to stay on despite Willow's presence, laughed at his hovering but approved of his concern. "Never seen a man more ready to be a father," she commented one afternoon as they watched Trace directing the construction of a cradle he'd designed himself. In late autumn, almost exactly a year after their wedding, Willow gave birth to a daughter. The labor was difficult but uncomplicated, with Mrs. Winters and the midwife from town guiding her through each painful contraction. Trace remained by her side throughout, his steady presence giving her strength when her own flagged. When the tiny, red-faced infant was placed in her arms, Willow felt a love so overwhelming it brought tears to her eyes. Trace, sitting beside her on the bed, looked at their daughter with awe. "She's perfect," he whispered, gently touching the baby's cheek. "Just like her mother." They named her Grace Emily Morgan Grace for the blessing she was in their lives. Emily to honor the wife Trace had lost. As winter settled over the ranch once more, they created new traditions as a family. Evenings were spent with Grace cradled between them before the fire, Trace reading aloud from favorite books or playing soft melodies on his harmonica while Willow sang lullabies. On Christmas morning, with snow falling gently outside their window, Trace presented Willow with an unexpected gift, the deed to the schoolhouse he'd had built on the edge of their property. "It's small," he said, watching her face as she examined the plans. "Just one room to start. But come spring, we can start looking for children to teach. The neighbors' kids, the hands' children, anyone who wants to learn." Willow's dream of being a teacher, which had seemed lost forever on that auction block in Redemption Creek, was suddenly, miraculously within reach again. She looked from the papers to her husband's face, seeing there all the love and understanding that had become the foundation of their life together. "How did I get so fortunate?" she asked, cradling Grace in one arm while reaching for Trace with the other. He took her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "I ask myself the same question every day. How did a half-Cherokee rancher with nothing but determination end up with everything he ever wanted?" "Perhaps," Willow suggested, "we were always meant to find each other." "Even through such unlikely circumstances," Trace nodded, gathering his family close. "I'm beginning to believe that's true." 5 years passed, bringing changes both expected and surprising. The Morgan Ranch expanded, not with the Harmon property Trace had originally planned to buy, but with different land to the south that proved even more valuable. The school Trace built for Willow flourished, growing from 6 students to nearly 20 as word spread of the quality education offered there. Grace was joined by a brother, Thomas, when she was 3, and the sound of children's laughter became as much a part of the ranch as the lowing of cattle and the whisper of wind through grass. On the 5th anniversary of the day Trace had rescued Willow from the auction block, they sat together on the porch of their home, watching their children play in the yard with the puppy Samuel had given them for Christmas. "You ever think about that day?" Willow asked, her head resting on Trace's shoulder. "How differently things might have gone." "Sometimes," he admitted. "But then I look at you, at our children, at everything we've built together, and I can only be grateful for how things turned out." Willow nodded, understanding completely. "From being treated like cattle to being treasured like gold. It's quite a journey." Trace turned to face her, taking her hands in his. The love in his eyes was as strong as ever, deepened by years of shared joy and occasional hardship overcome together. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "people talk about fate and destiny. I never put much stock in such things before. But that day in Redemption Creek, something made me look through that saloon window at exactly the right moment. Something made me follow the crowd to that auction. Something made me spend every penny I had to save a woman I'd never met. And something made me trust a stranger when I had every reason not to," Willow added. "So maybe there is such a thing as destiny after all." Trace smiled, the lines around his eyes crinkling in the way she loved. "Or maybe it's just that love finds a way, even in the unlikeliest circumstances." Willow leaned forward to kiss him, a gesture that still held all the tenderness and passion of their first embrace. "Whatever it was, I'm thankful for it every day." As the sun began to set over the Morgan Ranch, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Trace and Willow called their children to come inside for supper. Together, they walked into the home they'd built, not just the physical structure, but the family, the love, the life they'd created from an unlikely beginning. And in that moment, as in countless moments before and countless yet to come, they knew that what had started as a desperate bid at an auction had become something infinitely more valuable, a love worth everything they had to give, and everything they would ever receive in return.